Amy, you have to go now!
If Fall 2, Deadpoint made you think survival thrillers had already reached the highest possible point, Zipwire is about to test that idea. This time, the danger is not a collapsing tower or a mountain ledge. It is one woman hanging 1,500 feet above the ground on an abandoned zipline while armed men hunt her for a medical breakthrough that could change the world. MyAnna Buring stars as Amy Watson, a pharmaceutical researcher whose work on lung cancer becomes far more dangerous than she ever expected. Her mother died from the same illness, and that loss pushes her to develop a breakthrough treatment that could change how the disease is fought. Then everything goes wrong. Her research is stolen, her colleague is murdered, and the people responsible discover that the stolen data is useless without a special access code only Amy knows. That turns her from scientist into target. The trailer shows Amy being pursued into the Dolomite mountains, where every road and escape route begins disappearing around her. Eventually, she is left with one option, an old zipline suspended over an enormous drop. Amy already suffers from a fear of heights, and now the only way to survive is to step directly into the thing she fears most. That is what makes Zipwire work as a concept. The movie is forcing her to choose between the threat behind her and psychological terror in front of her. Once she begins crossing the line, the escape plan becomes another trap. Something goes wrong, Amy becomes stranded roughly 1,500 feet above the ground, and the people chasing her are still coming. Amy cannot run. She cannot hide in the normal sense. She has almost no space to move. Every decision happens with open air beneath her. A single mistake does not mean injury, it means death. The movie immediately invites comparisons to Fall and Fall 2, Deadpoint, and those comparisons are unavoidable. All three stories use extreme height as the main physical threat, but Zipwire adds another layer by building a crime thriller around the survival scenario. Amy is not trapped because of an accident alone. She is being hunted. The villains need information from her, which means they may want her alive long enough to get the code. But they do not necessarily need her safe. There is also a strong cliffhanger feeling to the setup, a dangerous mountain environment, criminals pursuing something valuable, and a protagonist forced to survive on terrain that should already be impossible. The difference is that Amy is not an experienced rescue climber or action hero. She is a scientist. Her strength is not brute force. It is problem solving. The same intelligence that allowed her to create a medical breakthrough may become the reason she survives. Amy understands systems, cause and effect, and how to stay focused when one wrong variable can ruin everything. Now she has to apply that thinking to cables, weather, distance, and human behavior. The Dolomites also appear to be more than just background. The mountains are beautiful, but they are completely unforgiving. The wider the landscape becomes, the smaller Amy looks. And the smaller she looks, the more impossible survival feels. Director Howard J. Ford has built much of his career around characters trapped in hostile environments. The Dead 2, Escape, Dark Game, and River of Blood all leaned heavily on survival pressure. Zipwire feels like a natural continuation of that interest. Ford likes putting characters in situations where physical danger and psychological pressure become the same problem. Here, the fear of falling is not separate from the chase. It becomes part of the chase. Tom Boyle wrote the screenplay, and his involvement is another interesting connection. He previously wrote The Ledge, another height-based survival thriller. That means Zipwire is not coming from people experimenting with this type of tension for the first time. They already understand that height only works on screen if the audience feels it. You need the camera looking down. You need unstable footing. You need wide shots that show exactly how far the character is from safety. And you need close shots where every hand movement matters. There are moments where Amy is suspended against the mountain with almost nothing visible beneath her. The cable becomes the entire world, but the movie also has to avoid becoming repetitive. A character hanging from one line for 90 minutes can become exhausting if every scene creates the same kind of danger. The crime plot may be the solution. The attackers can force movement, cut off exits, and change the rules. Amy may even have to decide whether to protect the research or destroy it to save herself. That may become the real moral conflict. Her discovery could potentially save lives. But the same discovery is the reason people are dying around her. How much is one piece of research worth? How many people should Amy risk to protect it? That gives the movie something more interesting than pure survival. The villains are not hunting treasure, they are hunting knowledge. The supporting cast includes Joseph Milson, Saffron Burrows, Sylvia Presente, and Michael Amarier. The trailer keeps their exact roles fairly mysterious, which may be intentional. In a story like this, trust becomes another survival tool. Amy may not know who helped steal her research, who killed her colleague, or whether everyone offering help is actually trying to save her. That kind of uncertainty works especially well when the physical environment already makes escape difficult. Zipwire will have its world premiere at FrightFest before its wider release at the end of August 2026. People understand the premise instantly. A woman, a wire, 1,500 feet of empty space, and armed men who want what is inside her head. The concept sells itself. The biggest question is whether the movie can make the height feel real enough. That is where films like Fall succeeded. Even when you knew visual effects were involved, the staging convinced your body that the danger was real. Your hands tightened. Your stomach dropped. You started thinking about where you would put your feet. Zipwire needs the same physical response. If it gets that right, the crime story becomes a bonus. If it gets it wrong, the entire premise loses power. Personally, I think the strongest choice is making Amy afraid of heights before the chase begins. That means survival does not only require courage, it requires transformation. She has to do something she would normally avoid at all costs. And every second she remains on that line is another second she proves she can move through fear instead of waiting for it to disappear. Zipwire is not trying to reinvent the survival thriller. It is taking a familiar formula and placing it in a new location with a different kind of protagonist. A scientist instead of a climber, a medical discovery instead of money, a zipline instead of a tower, and criminals instead of an accident. Zipwire arrives in August 2026. I want to know what you think after this first trailer. Does the 1,500-foot zipline setup look more terrifying than the tower in Fall? Or does this kind of survival thriller only work when the danger feels simpler? Because for Amy, the choice is brutally clear. Behind her are the people trying to steal her future. Below her is nothing, and the only way out is straight across.